All right, welcome once again to another Lethal Introspection Crew original exclusive. What are we going to talk about today, Matt?
Today, I finally, after 6 years, got you to watch Django Unchained.
Exactly. It was such a strange movie. I'm still kind of having it, digesting it inside of myself, even as we were setting up right now and getting ready to talk about it. I'm still completely at a loss as to what exactly it really meant to me.
Mm-mm.
You know?
All right.
I will start by saying that one of the reasons why I kind of didn't want to watch this movie for a long time, or not necessarily didn't want to, but didn't put any effort to watching it, right? Because it was on Netflix for a long time. It's like it would have taken me no effort to watch this movie.
Right.
But there was just something about the movie that I just felt it was a bit off-putting. I'm no stranger to the history of pre-1860s life in the South and the way life was for Black people. All of that stuff, I'm not in any way blind to any of it or ignorant toward any of it, although I'm sure I could be more intelligent than I am now of it. But it just Quentin Tarantino has such a strange way of handling subject matter that when I knew that he was the one to be doing this, to be directing this movie, I thought it was going to be just too weird for me.
Right.
And I I guess I was right because it was a bit too weird because I'm still at a bit of a loss as to where the point was in the movie.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think it uses, even though it uses really heavy themes, that it's more meant to be viewed as kind of like a comic book movie. Like Django is more like a comic book hero in this time. You know, his sub superpower is being really good with guns. You know, that's it. That's the way that I've always looked at it because Tarantino always goes over the top with everything. So I don't know what his fascination is with this time period. The Hateful Eight takes place in the same time period.
Another movie I haven't seen, so
Right.
watch out for that video because it will inevitably happen.
Yes. Yeah. I can't believe you haven't seen these movies. Tarantino knocks it out of the park every time. Well, for me. But, I think that Django is supposed to be more of just a superhero tale in that time period. More, that's the thing, is that because he goes so over the top, the violence and everything is all way over the top, including the really dark themes of the movie. You know, he doesn't pull his punches when it comes to that. He wants to show it all, and I think that is what allows him to capitalize on the vengeance that he does so well, because that's really
That is his bread and butter, just
Right.
a vengeance tale.
right. Kill Bill, Django. Fuck it. There's quite a bit of vengeance in Pulp Fiction. Yeah.
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 It builds up.
Yeah.
You mentioned it's a superhero movie, and I'm trying to find the archetypes of that kind of genre's beginning, and I'm having a bit of a hard time, just because to me the movie really seemed as though, even though Django was the titular character, and even though we do feel the majority of the movie through his eyes, the true catalyst of everything was Dr. Schultz.
Mm-hmm.
He was the genuine person who came by and changed everything. Because there was nothing in terms of who Django was pre-meeting Dr. Schultz that would indicate that what happened in the movie would occur. Which, I guess if I want to look at it in a positive sense, it could mean that it just goes to show that in that era, slaves didn't have any sort of opportunity to even consider it. But the moment that they were given a opportunity, they, took it to as far as they possibly could. And having this been my first time, and as I said, I'm still just registering the movie. That's just kind of how I'm viewing it. It's that Dr. Schultz is the guy that's always moving everything forward, and Django is always just in the position of the one being taught,
Mm-hmm.
which, I guess it makes me feel silly saying it out loud, because now that I'm thinking about it and trying to find parallels inside of my head, it kind of runs parallel to how Star Wars worked, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like
It's the
although
master and the
although
student.
yeah, although Luke wasn't a slave, he did find himself to be a slave to his routine, at least inside of his mind, and it was essentially Obi-Wan Kenobi who came and disrupted his world in the same way that it happened to
Mm-hmm.
Django, because he would have just been another slave like everybody else. Like, it isn't necessarily that all of the slaves don't have the potentiality for exceptionalness, but it just so happened that he was the one to be given the opportunity at that moment.
Yeah, Christoph Waltz's character really comes in as like a angel in every scene. Dr. King. First of all, that guy is one of the most amazing actors I've ever seen. Christoph Waltz. He's also in Inglourious Bastards. He plays Landa.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was an
Oh
amazing.
my god.
And that actually is the movie that in my mind I was comparing this one the most to. Yeah, because that was my very last Quentin Tarantino movie when I watched that one. That's the only frame of reference that I have in as far as I go. But there were a lot of thematic parallels that I did find from Inglorious Bastards and this one, which I think the biggest one is just the way that Quentin Tarantino, as a director, throughout essentially his entire catalog, has been very good at showcasing the banality of evil. Just how we as humans, when we do what a normal person would consider evil acts, it's for the most dumb shit ever, right? Everybody in Django that you talk to, although everyone's racist and says the N-word continuously, you can tell that that it's just the colloquial way of speaking in that situation. They do not understand any other way to address a black person other than the N-word every single time. And although that isn't an excuse, that is the reality of the situation, right? You want to meet the subject matter head on, based on what it is, because then then you become victim, well, not victim, then you become called out for potential whitewashing, of being like, oh no, they weren't supposed to say it that way. It's like, no, like that. That's what it was.
Yeah.
We have to look at it in the face, and if you think it's so ugly, wonderful, don't continue that.
Right.
It forgetting about it most certainly doesn't help, which is something that I always find is so in danger now, in terms of how our cultural sensibilities are leaning so hard to a desire to want to erase any of that ugliness from before, and for good reason, because who wants to be called a racist, and who wants to be racist, right? It's like, that sounds like an unbelievably uphill battle to be playing nowadays, and yeah, right. It's like you're going off against both cultural and scientific findings that completely put you at odds with reality. In the same way that a flat earther can go outside and see a flat landscape, but that doesn't equate to the whole of reality. And but that's us. That's us here, almost 200 years from when the subject matter of Django happened, right? And I would imagine that it must have been very hard for Quentin Tarantino to be able to really allow the spirit of that place to come out without it being as ugly as it was. Because I genuinely did not. I'm no stranger to the N-word, right? Because when I came from Honduras and I first began engrossing myself in American culture, I loved rap, and I still do, and that was my go-to. And because it had such a strong emphasis on lyrical content, at least in the '90s and the early 2000s when I came over here, that understanding the context automatically clicked inside my brain to the point that I was like, oh, I know the language now. Like, I can't not like these songs and understand them for what they are without understanding the words behind them. As opposed to a rock song where you can love the rock song and like you can kind of just mutter away the lyrics and never really think about them, but you can't do that with Nas. You can't do that with Tupac.
Yeah.
Because their words are literally the entire song. So, and because they use the N word profusely. That's their it's their word to use as as they see culturally fit. But at the same time, I mean, I find it unnecessary, right? If we're going to get introspective for real, right? When it comes to the N word, I personally find that it's a very regressive word, if anything else, because although you can personally mean it with absolutely no negative connotation, both as a black person and as a person of another color, right? Not just white, because a whole bunch of other types of people say the N word for a whole bunch of different reasons. Because of the baggage, it just automatically feels as though you're just bringing along history behind you every time you bring it up. I mean, every time you say it. Even when you're saying in private conversations and both people are entirely okay with it, if you are genuinely aware of the historical connotations behind it and don't allow yourself to be blinded, or live in dissonance of it, you have to understand that when you do use that word, you are essentially sprouting out the demons of the past in some fashion or another. Right?
Yeah, I completely agree.
We can find other words, I find. Words are probably the most freeing and free thing that we humans have ever created. And it's tough, right? Because
that
is my personal opinion. Far in the scope of me being a Latin person from Honduras who does genuinely know that they have West Ivory Coast African ancestry about 3-4 generations back from like Honduras and like the Caribbean circle and stuff. So it's not like I don't have like a toe in the game, right? But I'm not African American. None of my ancestors lived in the antebellum 1860s, pre-1860s, and 400 years later. 400 years pre his reality. And I will be the first to moonwalk my way away from even any sort of connotation of that. But once again, we're here talking about ourselves, trying to figure out ourselves, and also hoping that our listeners are figuring themselves out as we go along with them. And this movie, at least I would hope Quentin Tarantino would want this kind of discussion to be coming out of the whole situation. Be like, yeah, we use that word. We use that word hundreds of times. What did you think about that? Did you think that, hey, you know what? Yeah, all black people and all white people and everyone should just get to say the N-word all of the time. Let it rip all across. Because even Django in the movie, he even calls I'm gonna call him Moonlight. He calls him the N-word, and he calls the lawyer the N-word too, because he's like, okay, if we're going by literal definitions, right? The N-word in this literal definition is a person who is of servile nature from birth, essentially. And he called them out perfectly because he's like, hey, I was like almost born and raised to be this guy's lawyer by his daddy. What else is that?
Yeah.
What else?
A little bitch.
Yeah. Exactly, and we can call people little bitches all day.
Yeah.
Without having to feel. Because I censor myself personally because I feel that that's right to do. Once again, because I only have about a toe in the game. All I can do is perhaps try to backtrack us away from such situations, right? But whatever.
Well, that's interesting. That did you kind of feel that throughout the movie when you were watching it?
What part?
Like just the frequent use of the N-word kind of turned you off as you were.
Well, at the beginning, sure, but I think the the machine gun bombardment of it kind of dulls you to it, which I think might actually be a thematic point to talk about, in the sense that, once again, talking about the banality of evil, having such a truly evil word, if you think about it with its historical rootings alongside it, gets to be made to be so blah. It's just another word that they just throw around, comma, N-word, comma, N-word. Everything's it's just like that all of the time.
I think this is like a tool. I think this is kind of like a springboard for Tarantino, now that I'm thinking about it. Because it's like, who else could make this movie other than somebody who is going to take that and take that way of speaking about people and use it as a way to create this sense of justice. So because it's like such a demeaning term in its use at the time, to be able to take this character and rise him to the rank of superhuman by the end of the movie is sort of a tool that Tarantino uses, right? Like he's saying, in a way, he's saying, like he's addressing the bullshit in the connotation of the use in the word in the movie by making the protagonist the hero and making him superhuman, you know, as well as already having those traits within himself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're totally right. The way that Django wants to use, say, the N-word in a truly pragmatic sense, right? It's like no racial connotations to it. There's no, because you're black, you're the N-word. Like, no, it's like the N-word is reserved for people who are either servile or horrendously stupid. Like that, like that's what he wanted to take it to. It's like, okay, like if we're gonna use that word, like we're gonna use the word properly. But white people did not take to being called the N-word whatsoever, because they understand the power of the demeaning demeaning aspect and the power that it has behind it. It isn't; those aren't weapons that they used without thought. Those were crafted over long periods of time. Especially in the way that Calvin Candy starts explaining his own life, right? His own growing up and being around so many servile black people in genuine formal bonds of slavery, and just wondering, if I were them, I would kill all these people, right? He understands entirely the desire and the need for, I guess, violence in that, at least in that time, to be able to create some sort of form of change. And I guess through his own pragmatism of his time, right? His very crude use of science. Because what's the name of that type of science? Phenomenon, where you like phonology, yeah, where you just checking people's skulls and shit, thinking that the bone is the thing that makes the difference.
Yeah.
Right, but you know, it's like it's crude science is what it genuinely is, because at least Tarantino, and in his portrayal of that character, he showcases him to be both a harsh master, very harsh master, and at the same time he takes shit from Stephen as you know times goes along. He raises his voice to Stephen, but Stephen has quite the place in the plantation.
Yeah, Django mentions him early on as the only thing lower than a one-eyed Charlie is the main house servant. That's he said that's the only thing lower, and that's another reason why, or that's the reason why Stephen hates Django so much, because he knows that he's the lowest of the low, and this guy is right next to him, right?
I see. No, I see that.
That's my take.
It's watching Steven kind of reinforce the aspect of wanting to maintain the status quo from a position that you don't genuinely get to see too often, which is that of the house slave, right? Of the one that actually gets to have small intimations with the master, where they're allowed to joke around, you know, like you're allowed to get a little word in edgewise every once in a while, and it's a much softer chain than everybody else. And you also get the odd Führer-like nature of being the one to command all of the other slaves. So you're not like all the other slaves. And if freedom were to come and everyone were to be equal, that would be the worst thing for you, because you're used to being at the top.
And you know, all the field hands would probably come in and beat that guy to pieces.
Yeah, so he stands to lose as much as anyone else and essentially anyone who has the mentality of playing the game in that way, right? Because it's all, I mean, unfortunately, life is all always a game, and some people like Django, to they play to win in terms of what they want. That he's always willing to escape. Uh, Broomhilda always willing to escape. She had just been found out from escaping when they find her. So it's like that. Her indomitable spirit has not been broken one bit, even though she doesn't. I mean, it's been, I would imagine, like 2 years, 3 years since they've seen each other.
Something like that.
Yeah, I could only imagine that she imagines that Django is dead somewhere, or just working a plantation, unfortunately, somewhere out there, and yet she's doing her own thing, right? Unfortunately they never really get to explore what types of desires she has, but I would imagine that she would escape and try to go do something of her own. I don't know if she would also go off and try to find Django in the same way that he did for her. Because when I first started watching and he explained what he wanted to do, in my mind, just because of the times, I was like, man, like it just kind of seems like you should just cut your losses, because it seemed like uh, quite the high stakes. But when you have nothing to lose, why not go for the highest of stakes?
Yeah, and I think they both have that mentality too, both her and Django. Because they're, yeah, that Dr. King tells to Django about Broomhilda and oh fuck, I forget his name, starts with an F. But, yeah, that's the story of the movie is him rescuing her, you know? She's just as much of a catalyst as Dr. King is for the progression of the story. But he really, the thing about his character is, or Dr. King's character, is the whole reason that he's even a catalyst in the movie, aside from him being a more intelligent man who understands that like people are equal regardless of the cultural connotation. The only reason that he helps Django, the only reason he takes him under his wing is because of Broomhilda. Because her name is Broomhilda, because she was raised by German people. And I just think that's really interesting, because the story could have been much different had Django never imparted that to him. There never would have been a reason for him to keep Django around. He would have given him his freedom, $25, and sent him on his way, like he had planned on.
Which I thought was the way that the movie was going, in my honest opinion. I thought that, okay, he was found, he was freed, and he was given the tools necessary to be able to go off on what he wanted to go do. I didn't expect for Dr. King to want to stick around, especially for as long as he did.
He's a man of principle. That's the biggest thing about him, is it's the whole reason that he couldn't shake Calvin's hand. You know, he's like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to shake a monster's hand. I can't. You know?
Yeah, I thought that was a very poor move. I mean...
Not the smartest thing, but...
It was a very, very poor move, because, man, it just... Talk about catalysts. It absolutely descended into chaos afterward, in a manner that just genuinely didn't have to happen. How strange the universe that they ended up in, where I tried to keep count. I just seriously did try to keep count of how many people died in that scene, and I could not, as I was watching, and like continue to maintain strong interest in what was going on. Just so many bodies dropped, and so
very chaotic.
Yeah. One thing that really stood out to me was the how in the scenes when Django is getting just shot away by the extra farmhands, the amount of friendly fire happening across the board. I've been reading War and Peace lately, and I just got across the I think it's called the Battle of Austerlitz or something like that. And in that, although they don't really talk too much about friendly fire, they do talk about where the Russians and the Austrians and the Germans, they all of their officers have died, so nobody has any means to be able to tell them what's happening. So this man, Rostov, he's galloping through with orders, and he just sees the chaos of everybody just attacking each other. You know, friendlies attacking each other, and that's like a coordinated situation. But I can't only imagine the amount of times that just stray bullets just bounce off, and you have to strike one of your own, or you have to make the calculated risk of wondering whether it's worth shooting through another soldier in order to be able to get to the person that you're trying to get to. I mean, thank goodness I don't have to live a life that causes me to have those kinds of decisions. You know, thank goodness. But having them be so viscerally placed in front of me in the TV screen like that, I mean, it does bring to mind, because you're not doing it on purpose, right? It's like you're just trying your best to shoot, but at the same time, how shitty that guy is just laying in the middle of just screaming his head off the entire time, because he gets kneecapped, he gets shot in the
He
arms.
does get shot a whole bunch. I think that's mostly for comedic effect.
Oof.
To try to get you through the hyper violence as it's happening.
But yeah, it didn't do that for me. I mean, it most certainly didn't. It didn't. I didn't feel it was comedic in that sense. I genuinely felt into that, like, descended into that thought of being like, man, well, it would really suck to, like,
To be that guy.
not only to be that guy, but to be shooting, and imagining it in a bigger context of, like, a war, say, like a war where people were using, like, those kind of rifles and older musketry and stuff like that.
That's because shit's not that accurate.
No, right? At least with a sword and a pike and a spear, like, you have to point the thing to where you're going to. With a bullet, it's like you let it fly, and you hope that it's gonna land where you want it to. You hope that the air is gonna be favorable. That one of your guys isn't gonna walk right by. Oh,
Yeah.
how many times in a video game have you shot accidentally an NPC in the head?
Yeah.
Because they just it just happened to walk in front of them, and I always think, man, I can't even imagine how many times that could potentially be happening in a real life battlefield situation. Just
Yeah, it sounds terrible.
so bad.
Yeah, well, all those characters were unimportant anyway. I think it was just more fun to watch them die.
Well, see, that's the thing. That's actually, the fact that you say that actually does tie right back into the banality of evil, and how once you start killing more than 10 people, it starts kind of becoming comedic. When you're looking at it, you're like, what is even happening here?
Yeah.
Like, and maybe it's just because we're fucked up people, but that's kind of what happens to me. It's like, well, no, actually, that's exactly what happens to all humans, is that a singular person is a tragedy, but then the more people you stack up, it's like, well, 2 people died, okay, that's bad. Oh, 5 people died, what were all these people doing there? It's like,
holy shit, nobody stopped this?
yeah, right? Your stupid little ape mind starts falling into, like, the victim blaming, mentality, and yeah, the larger the number gets, the more dull you become to it. Be like, 100,000 people died? What do you mean by that? I can't even picture 100,000 people in a place,
Right.
let alone all of them dead at the same time. It's a weird abstraction, yet a genuine reality.
Yeah, he always cranks it up to 11 with that type of shit. And I don't know if you've ever seen, like, Snatch or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
I watched Snatch, yeah.
Snatch, yeah. Guy Ritchie does the same thing at the end of his movies, where basically everybody dies. And I think that's a really good way of both, like, wiping the slate clean for the end of the movie, but also kind of, yeah, like a palate cleanser, but also really hammering in the perceived justice that needs to happen to make the movie worth watching.
Yeah. I thought it was funny how they brought up how Mr. Candy was a Francophile and yet he doesn't speak French. How much of a phony he is.
Yeah, Leo is one of the best actors of all time, for sure, and he really knocked it out of the park with that one. That scene, I wanted to tell you while we were watching it, because it's one of the coolest things about the movie, but that scene where he comes in with the skull and cuts out the back of Ben's skull, and then he smacks his hand on the table, and you see his hand bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
He actually slammed his hand onto a glass and was bleeding from his hand, and he kept the scene going, and everybody else did too, and that's the cut that they wound up using in the movie. So when you see him slide his face across Broomhild, or his hand across Broomhilda's face, that's her genuine terror and disgust of like, what the fuck is going on?
You know, I noticed her face and I was like, wow, she's a very good actress.
Holy genuine
shit.
Terror.
Oh, wow. That is
a testament to
super
Leo
intense.
for keeping it together and fucking rocking that scene and that character to the nth degree. There's another little story of him being uncomfortable at the gratuitous use of the N-word that his character had to do.
Mm-hmm.
To which Sam Jackson pulls him aside and he says, "Motherfucker, this is just another Tuesday for us. Get your shit together. This is a movie." You know?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that character, Calvin Candy, I feel like the movie takes place amongst him, Dr. King, and Django.
Right.
Like, those are the three.
They're the contesting philosophies in between all of them. I mean, Candy has his own time's cultural zeitgeist behind him when it comes to what he believes. We agree with Dr. King because he espouses the progressive, forward 2018 kind of mentality,
Mm-hmm.
and Django is just a person who has been jaded. So it's very, very hard to place full-on blame on him because of the fact that he's been cut so hard that his diamond-like plating, just any kind of criticism just slides right off of him. Because, I mean, he is gratuitous in his violence too. He is, if anything, an anti-hero. You know, more Punisher than Batman, for sure. And he understands it. He understands the context of the world that he lives in. He doesn't seem to want to take pleasure in it, but he does. I guess he does as he's been taught. He is also a product of his time and of his upbringing in the same way that Calvin is. And potentially, I mean, we don't really get to really find out too much about Dr. Schultz's history prior to that makes him to be such a venerable in the situation. But, you know, there has to be some mystery somewhere. The movie would be 3 hours and 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like having an anti-hero who has a good bit of sheenness to their character. Having justifications for being so gratuitously violent is, to me, very important because gratuitous violence doesn't sell it for me anymore. It did maybe once, but now I do need to be able to feel as though it's leading to something. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning, I was asking, it's like, what exactly was the point of all of that violence? Because in the end of it all, right, they have Broomhilda's legal papers, and Django is free too. I was wondering what their legal status at that very particular moment was like at the end of the movie, because there were no witnesses. At least I wouldn't imagine that there were witnesses that would give them up. So, you know, thinking about the movie a little bit further past, you know, if we were to create an epilogue of it, it's like, I would imagine that maybe they'd go north. Yeah. Like, they could only do two things, right? Well, go north and try to live a satisfying life, or stay in the south and try to figure out some way to disrupt the system even further.
I think that would be the way that I would want it to go. Just to have the continuation of the story of Django. Mm-hmm. You know, he is a natural bounty hunter.
Yeah.
We already know that. Yeah, that's a good. They both had their freedom papers. You know, they were both free to make whatever they wanted of their life. But in the
I would imagine that the life would be hard now, right? Because it's, at least in the context of the movie's universe and the hyper violence and the hyper racism that they live in, um, that when Django was going around being free, he had Dr. Schultz along with him.
right,
So it was,
like a
so there
protector
was,
kind of.
yeah, a bit of there was dissonance within the white people's mind, being like, there would be little dissonance in the people in their mind to just take them both out. I mean, they were already ready to lynch them, uh, lynch them both, uh, when they went over to Big Daddy's house.
Mm-hmm.
So I bet their life would be hard, and perhaps that actually would reinforce their desire to just continuously disrupt the system. That life and society and the culture at the time will not give them the opportunity to settle down the way they want to. So the only other thing that they can do is make it so this society can't continue any longer, or for as little time as they possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to be a testament to the inversion of that ideal.
Yeah. Which kind of brings me to the talking about the mask scene when they were all like trying to when the lynching party was trying to like get themselves set up with the masks.
With the bags.
Yeah. That actually was the point where I even got the idea about the banality of evil, being like, okay, like what's the worst thing you can think of? It's like, oh, like a whole 30 people coming by to just lynch somebody,
Mm-hmm.
because they're black.
Mm-hmm.
And because another person doesn't have a problem with the fact that they're black. Like brains all over the wall, stupidity kind of thing. Um, but the prior to the action, right? It's like, and they even intersperse it in between. That was very masterful of him, and in being able to showcase that these are just normal people, just normal, ignorant, stupid motherfuckers who have wives that'll fucking make 60 holes in 30 bags in a very shitty way for them to be able to go out there and be dumbasses in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
And and the fact that all of these evils are caused by normal people, your neighbors. Not anymore, hopefully, as often, but that was the reality back in the day. Is that, your postman, your the guy that delivered the milk, or your mechanic, he was a Klansman, or he was one of the people who was willing to go through with the lynching posse, and that must be just suffocating. Even trying to put myself in the shoes of a black person in that kind of reality, that the only thing that really could be done in that sense, especially in the universe that he lives in, would be to meet violence with violence.
Yeah, it lends a lot to the justification of Django's character doing what he has to do.
But then doesn't that mean that Candy's philosophy wins out then? Because he doesn't have any issue in and of himself with black people. He has, with his crude science and his crude phenomenology of his own life, being around so many slaves, just come to those kind of conclusions. Being like, how are you going to tell a man who has genuinely been around thousands of servile black people and servile slaves, that that they aren't like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, although we understand, once again, in our 2018 modalities and ways of thinking, it's like, how do you manage to be able to then try and describe that to a person back then? You can't. The only thing that you can do is be like Dr. Schultz and moralize, try to browbeat them in the way that he tried to do when he was talking about the Three Musketeers, and how the author would be appalled by that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Candy pretty much brings out the cultural superiority on him, at that very moment when he tells him that in this county, the nothing is complete until they both shake hands, and he has to acknowledge him as an equal person, who as an equal to him too,
Right.
regardless of his own moralizing in the transaction.
So yeah, his philosophy almost went out until he got shot.
No, but that's the thing, is that the philosophy doesn't live inside of the person. The philosophy is the way everybody else lives their life. And he was right in the sense that Django was exactly that 1 in 10,000, as he said, right? But that, I see, at the same time, I don't like that that moral being that last moral of the story, because then that leaves out the other 9,999 as essentially like they being at fault for what happened to them, when that's not true whatsoever, because Django was one of the 10,000 easy if it hadn't been for Dr. Schultz giving him the opportunity to enact his own will to power.
Right.
But I mean, that philosophy is being given by Django, who is just coming to terms with being his own man and coming to terms with his own understanding of what he's doing, right? I wonder if he ever were to, like, in a quiet moment, think about, like, having everything have happened already, consider the fact that Candy was right, essentially. Well, he does mention it, doesn't he? He mentions it when he's shooting Steven in the kneecap, that of all the bullshit that he said, he got one thing right,
I am that one.
in one in 10,000. Yeah, it's just so strange trying to mix and they do that too in, like, Red Dead Redemption. Have you ever played that game?
I played some of the first one.
Some of the first one. Well, that one, a minor character is also a pseudoscientist in the same vein of thinking that, like, Native Americans are, like, subhuman to white people and stuff like that, and he tries to use exactly the same kind of scientific excuses, in terms of, be like, it's not my fault, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just going by the evidence that I'm finding, you know what I mean? And yeah, like, and it sounds just as silly to us, right? And that's always such an unfortunately anachronistic, like, crutch that we can't get around. Like when we were talking about perfume, right, and talking about how we would judge Grenouille and how difficult it is, because you have to consider him within the bounds and contexts of what everybody else considered him. And Django falls exactly in line of the same situation, because he was also an object person. I mean, an object first person. He was never given any sort of subjective autonomy whatsoever past when Dr. Schultz began to give it to him. And unfortunately, he was molded in, the crucible of violence, because his father figure was a bounty hunter. So what else could he possibly learn except how to shoot very, very well? I mean, not his only, but within what they show of the movie, a very endearing moment for him was him shooting those snowmen and having Dr. Scholes say that he's gonna be known as the quickest draw of the West.
South.
Of the South. Sorry, yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, that was that was kind of like the passing of the baton from student to master, where Dr. King realized, like, now I've given this man the tools that he really needs to achieve his destiny, or I've lifted the veil on what he knew was possible.
Yeah. It was a very subversive movie, because of how long it was, it almost felt as though the movie could end in different places if you wanted it to. If you wanted to just say stop watching the movie, you could just take, certain parts when he gives his freedom, when he meets Broomhilda and like they're about to leave, like that could be another ending. Like if you genuinely just stop right before he's about to shoot him, a whole other situation could have happened where they just seriously could have maybe walked away, or maybe not. See, maybe Dr. Scholes at that moment because having already met Big Daddy and understood how these plantation owner types think, that once they leave Candyland, that they're not really gonna get to leave Candyland.
Mm-hmm.
They would just be in a situation even more compromising and even further away from the main guy, that they'd actually never get to be this close to him to actually enact what they want to do at that moment. So, yeah, trying to give the movie as much, trying to think about it in the most positive sense possible, and that's the way that I'm thinking is what justifies his doing that, is that he's read the room, right? It's like, this guy's not really gonna let us leave, especially if he's playing this like little mind games of being like, shake my hand, you know? That's those are just bad signs. In the same way that Big Daddy gave him the bad sign of holding the the complaint papers, right as he was about to grab them. Those were all indications of what was to come. And I guess, and that's why Dr. Schultz decided to draw first in that scenario, being like, okay, well, if I'm gonna, it's like, if we're not gonna get out of here, neither are you.
For sure, you're not.
It's just very unfortunate how many people got compromised as a result of that.
Well, unfortunate or fortunate, depending on whose view you're taking it on.
Right, exactly. And it's very interesting how knowing that certain people ascribe to certain ways of thinking allows us to be able to dehumanize them so simply, to the point that it makes it so their deaths on screen feel justified, because it got me to thinking about the parallels between the massacre afterward and the massacre and like the people that they've been killing as time goes along for racist reasons, not for bounty hunter reasons. With the last scene, well, not the the last theater scene in Inglourious Bastards, and how I watched that movie in theaters and I was laughing joyously watching as those guys were just machine gunning all of the first machine gunning Hitler to like the bone, and then machine gunning all of the Nazis afterwards. And it wasn't until months or years later that I just started listening to analyses talking about how those are actually, how strange it is that we're able to, and Quentin Tarantino's able to play with like being like, it's like a funhouse mirror of morality, being like, oh, you're laughing at those people, getting shot and killed for the way that they think, and now you think that they're because of the way that they think that they should be allowed to be killed right away. It's like a kaleidoscope of morality, essentially, that it all depends on what color you want to moor yourself on. It's like, I'm gonna kill all the racists, or I'm gonna kill all the Nazis, and you get carte blanche for doing so. It's strange because I most certainly do not want to in any way defend Nazis or defend their philosophies or the southern like antebellum ways of thinking. I most certainly do not. But those horrible demons are like housed inside of people, right? People that are like me, and that through moral luck, because of where their environment was and where they happened to be born in, just happened to be inculcated with these sorts of thoughts. Because if you look at all the white hands that Candy has, they don't look any better off than in the black slaves. The only thing they get to do is sick the dogs on the black slaves, and maybe have the feeling that they can walk out of the plantation, although I bet none of them ever do. But they're fodder because of that, right? In the same way that those antebellum folk think that black people are fodder as a result of the way that they were born. It's just a continual weird tugging of the rope. It's very strange, especially because you can't. It's like you can most certainly say that one is worse than the other. Each person can say that personally, But at the end of the day, it's still lives being lost. That sucks.
Yeah. Well, you should. Yeah. I think it's important to go into any Tarantino movie with a real heavy suspension of disbelief in acknowledging that dichotomy, because the only way to make that vengeance really juicy is to paint the bad people as bad as you can paint them.
Right. I mean, because you are looking at it from the phenomenology of the protagonist, hero or not. Think about Kill Bill. She kills. I mean, they say that the Crazy 88, there aren't really 88 of them. It just sounds cool. But she still kills a whole healthy amount of people. She kills a whole ton of people. And each one of them are, right, genuine individual people.
Mm-hmm. With families and children.
Yeah.
Lives that they live, maybe, outside of their gangster profession.
Yeah, who's to say? And you're right. The movie, not just Tarantino movies, but movie culture inculcates you into to having that suspension of disbelief, being like, oh, those guys were never given names. Those people don't matter. They're just, we move on from that situation. Nobody has any traumatizing thoughts about how they just shot that person. No one stops to think about it anymore. That's just what we do. And again, I've experienced a lot of things that I would have never had the chance to experience visually through movies, and hyperviolence like that is one of those things, because I would never want to be in the middle of a gunfight like that, and I would never want to shoot somebody, to death like that.
And also, you would never want to watch that actually happen, right? That's a whole nother part of it that, like, thankfully,
all of the people got up at the end of when they said act cut,
right,
and they all stood up at the end of the movie.
Right. That's one thing that I think Tarantino does really well in his hyperviolence, because he chooses to use it. I mean, I know that he thinks that it's fun, but it also really puts a heavy hand on the emphasis of why he's using it. Like when Django shoots Candy's sister through the doorway and she just flies back like a rainbow. Yeah, it's the silliness of that, I think, is supposed to aid you in that kind of understanding of, like, the reason that it's so hyper violent, aside from him having fun with it, is that it's supposed to make you embrace that suspension of disbelief a little bit more.
Right. Comedy most certainly has the power to be able to do that.
It's like satire, like visual satire. Because people don't fly back like that when they get shot with a bullet from a revolver. But it's funnier if they do. And even more funny if they're the bad person.
Yeah. Yeah, this movie was very, very, very interesting, and just trying to paint the people as it goes along. Right? It's like, because their profession is to go off and find wanted murderers who are trying to, in many instances, lead normal lives.
Yeah, even the Aussies at the end, had they not been involved in transporting slaves, especially, I don't know if you noticed, but that was Quentin Tarantino.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Who couldn't?
He likes to put himself in all.
Yeah. It's like, talk about self-indulgence.
He can't help himself. I don't mind it. I like it every time. Especially because he was Blackie. He called him all Blackie. He's like, no, I'm not going that far. But I'll join in the fun a little bit. But yeah, that's the whole reason they died at the end, just because they were part of the business. They didn't seem like racists. They were just doing a job.
Right. It's all moral luck with wrong place, wrong time, and it just makes it very, very hard for me and anyone as the viewer to paint by numbers in terms of Django is, justified in doing X, not justified in doing this. Just because, again, like I said, he has this like plus 50 like moral plot armor that just makes it very hard for me to be like, yeah, you're gonna start judging him now.
How dare you?
Yeah.
He's at it hard enough, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I wonder if I would feel different having watched that movie now instead of when I did 6 years ago.
What do you mean?
I just, I there's so much more I feel that you're gleaning from things that I just never, I don't know, just that I never thought about.
Well, it's the whole point of the podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
It'd be very lame for us to just be regurgitating things we both already knew.
Yeah.
I like the movie because it did give me a lot to think about, because in our current political climate, or at least cultural climate, we're still trying to figure out exactly what the story is behind our history, right? It's like how much were were white people at fault for X thing, you know, like how much is it a product of like the genuine like systemic generational like issues that happen as a result of freeing the slaves, and then just being antagonizing toward them the entire time. And also the interesting visualization of watching Big Daddy's plantation and how big it was, and like the amount of different areas that they had. It's like they had like swing sets, and it's like it's like one of those places that gives those like old racist people the idea of thinking like, man, black people had it better when they were slaves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because at least they had people to take care, like they had something to do, and they're like, you know, it's like the most horrible justifications ever. But it's like if you look at those old plantations and you think about it in that sense, and then you are once again you genuinely empathetically transplant yourself in the shoes of those people thinking in that way, right? It's like it's a hard story to not buy without like without getting more historical information, just by looking at it, right? It's like, because it's like I try to be a compassionate person, and it's like I'm looking as this white person that I'm talking. It's like I try to be a compassionate person. I see the black people living in a poor neighborhood in a poor state in where I'm at, and then I see these plantations that they used to live in as slaves, and I think, you know, maybe they had it better as slaves.
They cut their unemployment rate.
Exactly. You start thinking about it in that, you know, that weird macabre like in that weird macabre logic, and it's very very hard to refute you if like those are the only facts that you have in front of you, right? Because that's, I mean, the facts that you know are the tools you use to be able to build the world around you. And if you have shitty tools to begin with, I mean, you're gonna end up with a shitty view. And then it's very very hard to reframe afterward. Especially because points of view get reinforced every single day based on their survivability capacity. I'll stop thinking X way if it starts getting me killed, right? And if you start thinking, you know, and if being racist is all you've ever known, and this odd feeling of superiority towards X person has allowed you to continue your meager existence in some way, it's like it is then very hard to come, you know, as another person, as a third party, come by and try to break you out of that illusion.
Yeah, that's the really interesting thing that Dr. Schultz's character was able to pull off through his eloquence and his wisdom, was imparting that and just allowing them to survive throughout the movie, appealing to character. I just thought that was an interesting trait, and I'm always a sucker for the eloquent master, you know, the guy who is able to use talk to move his way through the world.
I'm always down for a high point charisma character.
Yeah, and if there's any, as far as characters go, he's fucking an 11, for sure.
Oh, very easily.
Listening to him to speak was one of my favorite parts about this movie. Not only does Tarantino write killer dialogue, but he had Christoph Waltz fucking hammer it. in this movie. He's one of my favorite characters of all time. It's a real bummer that he died at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a man of principle, right? It's like, unfortunately, as wonderful as his philosophy was, it showcased itself to be short in the survivability aspect of it, right? Because it's like, if you genuinely do stick to your guns literally for everything you believe in, you'll probably end up getting shot.
Mm-hmm.
Very inevitably.
That's interesting, because that's the thing that kept him alive through the entirety of the movie, was sticking to principle, sticking to the rule of law. And then at the end, that's what got him killed.
Yeah. It's probably just another subversion in that sense then. But he went outside the law. He took the law into his own hands, and that's in that sense, because they were always able to impart their hyperviolence, and because they were being, cloaked by the law, and the fact that they had those circuit paper execution papers.
Mm-hmm.
So they were able to act with a bit of impunity, essentially, because they were like specters, just going by. It's like we'll take it from here. Bah! It's like, we'll kill a guy as he's plowing the field
With his son.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they brushed right through that, and yet that part, at least to Django, was a very significant character molding situation, because it allowed him to find out what kind of person Dr. Schultz was, and he even throws it in his face afterward. That you can't play it both ways. You can't pretend to be this compassionate, empathic person in one instance because it fancies you,
right?
And then break character afterward. And then try to say that, we have to stick to character all of the time. We have to be cold, even if this is the only time we can get them, kind of thing. Like, we have to be either one or the other. You can't just be wishy-washy in terms of it, because they're playing life or death. So whatever they ascribe to has to be strong enough to be able to carry them forth in such a lethal excursion. Yeah.
So what'd you think altogether? 5 stars, 4 stars? Where would you put it in the hierarchy of Tarantino movies?
In the hierarchy of Tarantino movies, it's quite low for me. It's a good movie based on a bunch of other movies. I'd say it's like an 8.5 out of 10 for me as a movie. As a Tarantino movie, it's a bit low, just because the kind of themes that he's kind of striking at, he's already dug at before in other characters and in other movies. Not in this such a intense, in-your-face way. But it's been done before, and again, I'm still having a hard time really parsing out the point of the whole situation, all in all. Because are we supposed to be happy for Django and the fact that he got his woman back, and at the cost of everything that happened, or are we supposed to be like worried for him because inevitably everything's gonna come crashing down, as Steven says, because unfortunately his last words are probably the most foreboding and real of what'll inevitably happen, which will be word will get out, and eventually they'll torture one of the black slaves that was still left over in the plantation, and he'll eventually give out his name. Who's to say? It's like that's the really crappy part. If you really want to think deeper and further down the line, it's like his story doesn't end well.
That bums me out.
It does. And you know what else bums me out, and why I think I actually don't like this movie even a little more? I was almost forgetting about it because we were getting so deep into everything else, but I thought that the soundtrack was so manipulative. Yeah, a lot of the songs are very anachronistic, and seemed very, very out of whack in terms of the movie,
Mm-hmm.
especially when for the most part I really liked how they made up his own theme song and everything like that at the beginning and stuff like that. I don't even know if that was like from the original movie or not.
Yeah.
I have no idea, but
I don't know.
I like that. I like it when movies are. I mean, and I'm sorry. I like it when music inside of movies is synced with what is happening in the movies. Having rap be in the movie just because black people do it, and it's a predominantly African American enterprise, doesn't automatically mean, at least to me, to just shove it into the movie, right? It's like there could have been other choices, and for the most part, they have so many instances where they break out into like a minute or like 45 seconds worth of like in like a symphony or an overture, and it just goes off and on and on, and it happened like half a dozen times in the movie, and it got to be so bad that I began to notice it, and I really did not like that. I did not like a lot of the use of music in this movie. Yeah, I just felt that it was one of those moments where it was like Tarantino was kind of pushing his hand a bit, where he was like, "Now feel this," and you're supposed to think this. And
yeah, it was always used in a moment of like trying to emphasize the power dynamic of what was happening.
Yeah, and it wasn't used in a subtle way, especially for a movie that is this long and uses so much music throughout it, that if it would have been parsed out, it would have been more powerful. But there's at least 1.5 movies in this one movie. Like there's a lot of content in it, and it begins to wear down because of that. I'm not really sure what scenes I would really cut from the movie as a whole. Again, I have that same problem as I did with Perfume. That aspect I have no issue with, but I most certainly could have done with a lot less audio manipulation.
Stop telling me how to feel.
Yeah, honestly.
Make me feel. Yeah.
Yeah.
It does seem kind of lazy now that you mention it.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, and I just felt it throughout the entire movie. It was never so breaking that I was like rolling my eyes or anything like that, but yeah. I just become more sensitive to that as I grow older. It's like, oh, no, the music is getting all quiet, and it's like, oh, now you want me to get all sad. It's like, I'm such a contrarian that the moment that you start trying to tell me that I should be feeling this way, I'll start feeling the opposite automatically. And I think that based on the zeitgeist of our time, of our genuine time, a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people like to be contrarians just for the sake of contrarianism. They fulfill Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, saying that we'll never get to the Crystal Palace because we'll just want to break it down, because it, like, who cares about logic? You know what I mean? I just want to think the way I think, all right? I don't want 2 + 2 to equal 4. Not today, all right? And, yeah. And it just you kind of shoot yourself in the foot by trying to be so manipulative. And I mean, he is such a masterful director that he has to know that that's what he's doing, right? It can't be an accident in my mind. Like I can't give him so much praise and then be like, oh, he must have, that's just something of serendipity that just happened to be that way. Like, no, all of this is probably very well tailored, and he probably got asked 5 different songs to use for every single one of those moments. He knows what he did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting, especially if you ever watch, there's an interview with Tarantino on some talk show where the hostess and the guests were both black, and he is very uncomfortable throughout. And I think that's just a testament to his playfulness as far as being a director goes with the music. It does feel a little cheesy.
It is, man. The very last thought, the very last word that I had at the end of that movie was corny. That's the very last word, because of the whole like plugging our ears and then like it genuinely devolving really, in my mind, devolving into like a B-class superhero movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And it also kind of subverts all of the like hyper violence against black people in the movie.
exactly. Yeah, it's just another thematic key to to be able to get Django to this place,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to them once again, just like all the white people that were shot,
Mm-hmm.
all black people that were enslaved, all real people. Another last preceding last thought that I had right before he blew up the movie is he only black people he told to get out of the house were the two people going up the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else has any idea about what's happening right now. All right, how many people just died inside of that
Inside
house?
the house. Well, hopefully when they heard all the gunfire, they got the fuck out of there as fast as they could. But yeah,
Yeah,
yeesh.
yeah, those are the yeah. I mean, like the more I'm thinking about it, it's like those kind of that swampy aspect of the movie really props up.
Mm-hmm.
And a movie that's so long, I think, unfortunately, opens itself up to such amount of criticism because there's so much time to look into it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the movie would have only been 2 hours long, hour and 55 minutes long, it would have been on. I would not have had as much issue with the audio manipulation
Mm-hmm.
because then it would have been just less amount of it. It would by volume it would have just been less to the point that I wouldn't start thinking that way.
Right.
Yeah, but he himself decided that he wanted it to be this long. He wanted to have this much exposition in terms of his origin story and
Mm-hmm.
in terms of everything else. Yeah, and the finished product is, to me, an 8. Now, yeah, I said 8.5 at first, but really that audio stuff, it really did genuinely bug me.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. I'm a smart enough boy to know how to think, and feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And you should be a good enough director
To trust me.
Yeah.
It's like, this is what, his, like, 7th, 6th movie? I'm not even really sure, right? But it's like...
It's up there.
Yeah, and it was made in 2012, which means that he's had 20 years of experience under his belt, 20 years of knowing who his fans are.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, credit where credit's due, right? It's like, we know that you're a good director, so treat us like intelligent moviegoers.
Mm-hmm. That's a whole reason he busted on the scene in the first place was with Pulp Fiction.
Exactly, right? Yeah, because there's a wonderful movie of nothing but high octane gray morality.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't try the movie. Yeah, the audio in that movie. Just if we're really gonna try to compare Tarantino right now from old to new, it's like all of the audio in that movie. Although it's been like about 1.5 years since I've seen it, I don't feel manipulated throughout it. It's like he uses swanky music that is good at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That it conveys an emotion, but it conveys more an atmosphere than a feeling, and I like that more because I can be engrossed in an atmosphere and then feel how I want to in terms of it, as opposed to being like sad. Now feel sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a hokey thing that a lot of sitcoms do and other television shows. On
That's what the
Mm-hmm.
and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what the canned laughter, that was what it was all about. It was, I don't know, having such little faith in the public that it's like we got to tell these adults how to think,
Right.
how to feel.
Right. It's like anytime you put on a show with a laugh track, you're like, nope,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, you lost me right there. Yeah.
Because
Trust
it
us.
works, and that's what's shitty about it. Because when you hear a laugh track, even when the joke is terrible, there is a little feeling inside of you that's like, you give a little smirk alongside it because it's just like It's Always Sunny said. It's like, oh, I like it. The laughs tell me when to laugh. Yeah, and a guy with as much veneration as he shouldn't be doing such parlor tricks.
Mm-hmm.
The movie already has enough power behind both its historical context and the kind of anti-hero movie that he already wants to portray, that I saw that as both being very self-indulgent and very insecure at the same time. Because there would be no need for such hand-holding if he genuinely didn't think that his movie was giving the message that he wanted to.
Mhm.
Which I think actually adds to my issue with never finding a point in the movie, in the sense that even he had a hard time really parsing out the point. He wanted to just create a high octane movie with, what if the slave was the guy shooting all the white people this time? I really hope that that wasn't as far as his mentality was going for it, you know. But if I'm really considering all of the other facets of the movie and how they look at me as the viewer, it's like, you know, what does Quentin Tarantino think of me as a person who watches this movie? It kind of makes me feel like he's like, and now look at how the black people are being treated. Isn't that really bad? You know? And it's like, and let's show you again how that guy got eaten by dogs, so we can remember how really bad that was.
Yeah. Yeah. Man.
There you go. We cut this movie to pieces.
Yeah, I'm
that's
really
what it
bummed
means
out,
to be
actually.
lethal.
The more that we talk about it, the weaker I think it is in his line of movies. But at the same time...
But good, right? It's like, the point of this is for us to parse out ourselves, too, right? We want to be able to also articulate our veneration for certain things, like, you know, with like our Jordan Peterson video. It's like, you know, we talked high about Jordan Peterson in that video, but we didn't talk very much about the genuine criticisms about him, right? And in this one, I want to be able to give a better balanced opinion, because I do think that Quentin Tarantino is a highly respected director with a lot of wonderful movies that I will pop on and watch, no issue, under his belt. But at the same time, I see the warts, especially with so many new movies in his catalog. And I'm actually kind of now very interested to watch The Hateful Eight to see if this was an aberration, or if this was a new trend that he was going into.
Now that you're mentioning and really shining a light on some of the flaws in this, I think, and this is just my opinion, and we're going to have to go over it again when we watch it, but I think he learned a lot.
Okay.
From the mistakes that he made in this movie. The Hateful Eight is definitely, there's no... Well, we'll get into it when we watch it, but a lot of the problems that you had with Django, I don't remember seeing in The Hateful Eight.
Okay.
And I'm excited to watch it, too, because I don't feel like it got a really big... Its release in theaters was really weird, and I don't think it got a lot of good reception, but I think it's one of his stronger movies. I'd put it right up there with Inglourious Bastards, which I think is probably his best movie. But that aside... Yeah, Django has definitely been knocked down the ladder a couple pegs.
Wonderful. I mean, I'm glad that it was this video has been useful to you too, man.
That's the only point.
Yeah, exactly. We don't remain static here whatsoever. We're as fluid as our thoughts will allow us to be. And you know, I'm not bringing this up to be, you know, any sort of Debbie Downer, because I go into anything that other people want to show me with a very high desire to be as excited as they are about it, right? But I can't quiet the voices inside of my head, especially when they tell me such disconcerting things. And I hope that these are things that other people have noticed. If you've never noticed it, it would be very useful to check it out, to see it, and really notice it in other movies, because once you begin to feel that whole audio manipulation one time, it becomes essentially like the color orange. Like, you can't miss it anymore.
Yeah,
like,
it's glass shattering. Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, because that is one of those. It's like a weight on your suspension of disbelief. Like, you're supposed to allow the music to engross you, and at the same, and like I said before, I'm still not averse to allowing a movie to use music to paint me an atmosphere along with its visual showcasings. But I don't want to be handheld audibly to a particular feeling.
Right. It's like the visual representation of jump scares. It's kind of cheap. It's hacky.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we've gone through Django as much as we possibly can. We've loved, we've hated. We've given our opinion, and we hope that we can hear from one of you guys in the comments. If you think we're full of shit, if this movie was a 10 out of 10 for you, let us know why. I would really like to understand how one could defend this movie up to a perfect veneration. And maybe we're very far off, and there are even more reasons to peg this down. We'd love to be able to figure some of those out too, so that way we sharpen our blade a little bit more too, so we get more critical in the next one. Because we want to love the right things, right? We don't want to be shepherded toward whatever is cool at the time or whatever we just perceive to be right at the time.
Yeah.
But I'm tired and and ready to go. So I think with that, we're just gonna call it a good day and good night.
Good night. Good night. Good night.